you can come to a point where you say, God, my heart's corrupt. I know it's right, and I often find myself doing the wrong things. I recognize that about myself. I humbly admit that, okay? That's not changing your heart. It's confessing you have a corrupt heart. God's part is transforming the heart. God's part is giving us a new heart. So once you confess you have a bad heart, then God gives you a new heart. Calvinists reverse that order. God has to step in unilaterally, step in and change the person's heart to cause them to confess they had a bad heart. So in other words, you have to get a new heart on Calvinism to confess that you had a bad heart. And your heart's not even bad anymore, apparently. At least it's been regenerated in some extent on Calvinism, because you've been born again in order to believe and in order to trust in him. So in order to confess that you have a bad heart, in order to confess and believe in him, you have to get a new heart first.
We aren't saying that before we were believers, our faith box was broken and then God magically fixes it, so now we can do something that the unbelievers can't do. What we're saying is that we can do something the unbelievers could do if they wanted to. But the reason that we want to is because God changed our heart. He regenerated us, filled us with the Spirit. And the automatic response of a regenerate heart is to love God and to follow God and to confess sins and humble themselves and all the things that Leighton's going to point to and quote verses where everybody's humbling themselves, and he assumes free will into all of that. The Calvinist says, no, that is the result of the things that God works in us, right? So God is not making us ontologically better people. God is changing our hearts so that we merely desire and want to do the things that unregenerate people don't want to do, but could if they wanted to. I know that's long and slightly complicated, but I hope I've done at least enough of a job to for you guys to be able to see that distinction. It's an important distinction. If it's properly understood, it undercuts his point here that Calvinism has believers being ontologically better. No, we do not. What we have are people wanting to do what unbelievers don't want to do, but could do if they wanted to do, namely believe and confess and humble and on and on and on. But we ascribe all the credit to God. It's not a moral change that we could bring about in ourselves. God had to make that change in our hearts. And the result of that change is that we want to use our faculty of faith that we've always had since we were born, that we could have used this whole time to believe in God, but just didn't want to because we hated him. Now we use that very faculty of faith to properly believe in him because we love him and we want to believe in him. Same thing goes for loving God, obeying commands, all of these things. When you're talking about a moral category, every person who's ever been born could do these things, qualifier, if they wanted to.